Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's Thursday, and we're really excited to have you all here with us, taking some time off from your work and through the day. So, today's session is all about just in time access and zero trust, which Lawrence would be taking you through. Specifically, we're discussing the challenges and why the way we have historically managed permissions and what the industry is doing about it right now. So, before we dive in, a few quick housekeeping items. Throughout this presentation, we'll be sharing polls. So, please participate when they pop up. We'll love to hear your thoughts. And we'll be saving the questions for the end. So please use the Q&A chat just to drop in anything you want to ask during the presentation, and we'll make sure to respond to it towards the end. And I think we would just love to hear where you all are joining from today. So if you can just drop in the chat where you all are located, it would be lovely to see who's in the room. And with that, I think I'll hand over the things to Lawrence, who's our data and AI research lead, and he's worked like 20 years and some like a decade in Gartner. So a lot of you have already been in touch with him, have worked with him in the past, or know him from our socials. So Lawrence, let us get started. Take it away.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. So I hope everyone is having a great morning or midday or maybe evening. I'm not sure where you are in the world. But today we're going to talk about the future of what I call JIT-Trust or just-in-time trust. And really the concept is that, we have legacy identity systems that are really insufficient for the autonomous AI agents that are emerging, and they're creating a significant security gap, right? We also have this sort of never trust, always verify model, and it's outpaced by the speed of modern threats. We're going to talk a little bit about how that has implications in this new framework that I have proposed. We propose this idea of just-in-time trust or JIT trust as an evolution of, the current agentic systems and how we're, evolving trust between agents. And then, JIT trust leverages this notion of intent intelligence, and we'll kind of talk about that, and how it's really kind of a strategic shift, moving to continuous sort of intent-aware risk scoring, which I think will help prevent compromise. And then how to solve for JIT trust, kind of, what does the landscape of vendors look like? So let's start first by, I know this is probably simple and many people have their own, rendition of what an AI agent is. But, really an agent is at a basic level, two components and, a piece of software that is, tied to an LLM, and, it's given a goal. It has a reasoning engine, which is part of that LLM context window. It has this notion of a control loop. And an AI agent is essentially when you connect those two things to software and you give the AI agent, wherever that remote software is, a task. Now that agent can be, inside a SaaS offering and just, giving you data, maybe transforming data, or it can remotely control a software instance, right? It might have access in the case of some agents that are in maybe a container environment for development or some other task. It might have access to, external tools, and it might be doing that through, an MCP server. But at a basic level, it's remote software tied to an AI agent. And those two are essentially orchestrating, and there's feedback being given to the control loop. All right, so identity in the agentic age has become pretty problematic, and really that's because legacy systems can't handle autonomous AI agents. And so over the last maybe year and a half, a lot of us have been hearing about non-human identities, and today they're significantly outnumbering the number of human users we have in place. And what this means is that if you don't have more modernized systems or you don't upgrade, you may lack the ability to basically identify these hidden and disparate identities that exist outside of those traditional controls. You probably heard of non-human identities in the context of, service accounts or service principals. But in Agentics, this evolves considerably, right? Local AI models also, may exhibit unpredictable behavior and hallucinations, which, contribute to strangeness in identity behavior, even in the SOC or within the tools. And the identity tool ecosystem is really fragmented. There's tools for more oriented to human identities, which are IAM systems, identity security posture management, which I'm actually doing a deep dive right now on, IGA, PAM. There's ITDR for defending, the entirety of the system itself and the sources of identity. And then there's non-human identity systems that are emerging with NHI kind of automation and IAM. We'll deep dive a little bit of that. And then there's governance of all those things. And then, of course, the identity infrastructure itself is pretty wide and vast with many sources of identity that various orgs choose from. Um, so I think we'll jump into a quick poll. Nupur?
Yes, so I can share a quick poll here about just-in-time trust controls.
Love to have your feedback on these polls.
I hope everyone can see the poll.
I believe so. All right, so the question, oh, and I'm getting pop-ups here. Sorry, folks. So the question is, who should own JIT-Trust controls in your organization? And it looks like so far, identity and access management's getting the win here. Security operations and CISO. Um, it looks like nobody's really voted for AppSec, which is interesting. And when I introduced ITDR years ago, or at least the concept within my prior employer, I actually spoke to how those systems have to be tightly coupled with a SOC with kind of a dotted line, reporting and operational structure, for the simple reason that the SOC needs to understand this stuff. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and I'm not sure. I think this is the results here. It looks like it's pretty split, which is kind of a good thing, I think. All right, so I
I'll stop
think
sharing.
I hit stop sharing. Okay. And then let me see if I can get back over to my screen again. Sorry, folks. I'm learning Zoom here. Oh, where's my share? Give me just one sec. I'm sorry, folks. I'm learning. Now can you see my screen?
No, it still shows quick poll. It's like, oh, now we can see it.
Okay, great, great. So, as you look at agentic risks, I mean, obviously there's tremendous number of risks that are emerging. And one thing I'd like to speak to here is we talk about AI and agentics as, these new emerging risks, like prompt injection, indirect prompt injection, the uncontrolled actions, all these things that are attributes of agentics, right? Data poisoning attacks, all this stuff. But one thing to really keep in mind is as these things actually get deployed operationally into an operating system, they're subject to all the things that humans are at the same time as all of these new emerging risks. And so, it's important to pay attention to all these emerging risks. But at the same time, if you put an AI agent, let's say an OpenClaw, and you have it reading your email, it could be subject to phishing risk just like a human, not just the indirect prompt injection or the data poisoning that might happen within the email system. And then, of course, attackers obviously, I think, have demonstrated lots of, attacks against AI. There's been data exfiltration with, tools like Copilot. There's been data exfiltration and, tools that examine your email. I'm aware of agentic actions that have gone awry. I think even in the latest Mythos model, there's been testing that they were doing where they placed two agents in a rather benign sort of enterprise environment, and it started going off the rails, right? So it started to figure out ways to get outside of its containment and do nefarious acts. So, I think that we have to be cognizant of all of these layers simultaneously. And one big part of this is identity, right? And in the future, I think we will have, I mean, a lot of the market motion has been this ephemeral identity, but I think it will be shifting. So obviously, if we take a step back, most of us in the CISO role or in the IAM team or maybe in SecOps, we're all trying to work towards making sure that we meet regulatory mandates. And obviously, these things are constantly evolving, constantly changing. And there's frameworks that we're looking to try to address. Some of them here, like for example, the requirement to do, red teaming and kind of autonomous, pen testing. Red teaming is emerging in the agentic realm. And obviously that drives a lot of the federal and enterprise requirements. You have things like NIST AI RMF. You have, the deeper resilience regulations there. You have DORA that a lot of people are trying to grapple with that affects the financial sector. And these requirements essentially, help benefit us because it gives us kind of the tool to go and make sure that things get done. But at the same time, they're typically tend to be a little behind where we really need to head. And so obviously these are changing fast, but they're important regulations to pay attention to and focus on. So when we look at how AI agents are evolving, you have on the left-hand side of the screen here, I think it's above my head, you have delegated sort of single person using an AI tool. So examples are, Claude or Cursor or OpenAI. You have sort of visual style agents like Copilot Studio. You have Agent Force. You might have some embedded agentic workflows where AI is making decisions inside of a workflow. And then you have full-blown kind of agentic apps and remote agents where you might have them doing planning, executing tools, or even using memory. And again, remember that traditional IAM systems have always thought of identities as these long-lived things, right? And we've gone through stages of development in terms of ISPM, where now we want shorter term lifespans. But in agentic land, if an agent is spawned, it does an activity, and then we kind of want it to go away. We want this ephemerality, right? We want identities to be created on demand, last for a few seconds or for the task duration, and that also helps us scope the activities that we're permitting that agent to do. And if you look at traditional behavior, it's rather fixed. I mean, not entirely fixed, but unlike autonomous agents, which I was at this the RSA conference. An example was, if you gave an AI agent, a task to go inside a house and get you a glass of water, it will explore through the entirety of whatever access it has. So it'll go through every door. It'll, look through like through your kitchen. It'll open every, drawer. And because it doesn't have a sense for what its boundaries are unless you give it boundaries, right? And give it governance. And so, agentic identities also need to leverage the behavior of that identity and be closely tied to it in order to really be effective. All right. So when we take a look at the identity ecosystem, these tools that the agents are tied to, they come with those permissions, right? So you have maybe delegated access to a calendar. That might be a little bit more limited in scope. You might have limited access to Salesforce or email, but in some of these other tools, and this is all depends on kind of a lot of decisions that you make, but you might have unscoped access, right? So again, back to that notion of the glass of water, go look through the whole house to get to it, right? And so, we need to move towards this behavioral approach in agentic land. And I sort of it's similar in nature to EDR, which is a term I helped introduce years ago. When we look at the agentic security requirements, they kind of span visibility and discovery. A lot of organizations are gaining greater visibility, sometimes through their SASE offerings, sometimes through specific deployments, their firewalls, their endpoint agents, a variety of tools. But there's also runtime and enforcement controls that have been emerging the last couple of years, and that give you visibility into the actual prompts that are occurring. Oh, I lost. Sorry, I just sorry, my screen disappeared for a second there. All right. So they have visibility into all the prompts that are going back and forth between various AI services or even their own, right? And AI services have one problem space, and then sort of custom, agents that you deploy for yourselves and you build your own have a different set of risks, right? And so we need to monitor the posture and perform risk management across all these different resources and deployment methods. All right, so the existing technology kind of gives you this sort of zero trust gap where modern threats, can exploit these vulnerabilities in minutes. Right? I mean, a lot of us have been reading about Mythos, and one of the things that I've been grappling with myself is how do you how do you compete with a model that can, identify an exploit in source code, go and build a tool instantaneously to exploit it, and then agentically, travel through the entire lifespan of an attack. This is a big issue we're all grappling with, and it's going to require a lot of evolution of tools. And it's quickly outpacing the sort of never trust, always verify approach, where we need defenses to be a little bit more shared. And AI agents are giving a new class of identity risk. And the current JIT controls are really just too simple. I would call them cumbersome to implement when it comes to, spiffy and some of the newer, or well, I would call them newer standards, but they're actually a little bit out of date already, right? And they're too difficult to implement in some cases. Now, again, for those that are on the phone that are identity providers, please don't be offended by my comments. I am generalizing a little bit. The industry, I think, needs this dynamic and behavior-based trust model. And so what I proposed is if you think about these various different kind of authentication types here listed in the table, you've got, traditional machine identities. Those are like long-lived, right? Agentic identities, as I pointed out earlier, are ephemeral in nature, right? They might be spawned to do a certain task. You might want to have zero standing privileges where privileges don't exist on a system, and really that helps us defend the system that doesn't have an identity on it or have trust established. So that if an attacker tries to come in sideways or lateral, it helps reduce that risk. But there's also this notion of traditional NHI, which is deterministic. It's really fixed, right? I use this service account. It connects into my HR system. It transmits some data or exchanges tables within databases, and it runs and then goes away. But that credential is still there. That And we're moving to this probabilistic, autonomous sort of operation where it can do various functions, and it's not a fixed sort of behavior. And then if you look at, the big problem we've been talking about for, quite a few, years now is all these secrets and secrets management and, the DevOps pipeline of secrets, which I think all of us can admit that we still use today, right? I mean, a lot of us are, using and deploying secrets, and that's a big problem. In fact, I think some of the first problems in OpenClaw were, secrets that were stored in various, MD files or other files, and hackers instantly sort of, breached them. Now we're moving to this again, what I call JIT-Trust, which is intent aware. So we're actually building a behavioral policy that is intent aware, and it considers intent. And so let me introduce you to the JIT-Trust concept, which is, that if you look at the image on the right-hand side here, you have your standard sort of who, what, where, when, and the time length. But the idea arose to me, just so you know where I got this JIT-Trust concept, was when I was exploring the unified agentic defense market. I realized that all of the folks that had, prompt gateways or were inspecting within a browser or, interceding and able to see what agentic requests and natural language was passing in the prompts, I realized that they were all deriving intent, okay, which is great. It helps them derive a better policy and enforce behavioral control. What it doesn't do great at is when we start to do agent to agent communications, or lateral communications with other orgs. And I realized that, this intent could become intent intelligence to derive scoring of various agents, right? So let's say that org A and org B want to talk to each other. Well, you're probably familiar with, reputation scoring for IP addresses. Well, we could do the same kind of thing with AI agents. And when we hook up our agents to other systems, they could share that intelligence so that we now can control behavior through these sort of, transactions across orgs or between orgs. And the actual concept came to me from an earlier concept that DARPA did, which was introduction-based routing. And that concept was based on sort of when you introduce a friend, how do you introduce a friend? How do you establish trust before you introduce your friend? You vouch for them, right? That's what scoring is. So this, I think, is an evolution in Agentics for zero trust systems. It provides a measure and score of the true intent of an autonomous agent. And it gives us the ability to apply access control and trust, across semantic access, right? And then it helps us provide dynamic authority mapping for AI workers, with shared intelligence and shared intent. All right, so this is sort of a deeper dive of what I call, intent intelligence. And so on the graphic below, you have a user or an embedded AI agent, those prompts that I was describing, prompting various, LLMs, and then you have this derived intent. And what I realized was, you could actually take that intent and craft an intent taxonomy. Now, individually, each vendor in UADP that has prompt inspection and many others that do not have as much unity in defense, they are all extracting intent and they've got their own intent taxonomy. But I realized in order to share it, we kind of have to agree on what intent is, right? Um, and just to give you a sense for other things that we might tie to intent, is agent intent source indicators might be the agent identity, the agent name, a unique ID, a GUID, maybe some user telemetry that was, or maybe an anonymized version of such. Maybe when Lawrence asks his agent to go do something, like it says Lawrence asked to do this, right? Unique identifiers that go along with that, the domain, the IP, etc. All of this can be incorporated into a shared enforcement model, right? With shared intent intelligence. All right, so Newport, you're up again. It's a quick poll.
Yeah, for sure. We love seeing the questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for those. We'll respond to them in the end. But also love that how you clearly put, the examples, Lawrence, and compare them to real life. It's really, really very easy to understand. So here's our next poll, everyone, and it's about agentic identities. So I'll be launching it right now. So please vote and let us know your thoughts on this.
So the question here is, what is driving your urgency around agentic identity and trust right now? Is it non-human identities? Is it we can't tell good versus bad agent fast enough? Do we have overprivileged access? Or maybe it's not urgent for you. You're like, hey, I want my open claw to be open, right? Um, so great, great responses. So right now it's almost a tie between non-human identities and agents are exploding, or we can't tell good versus bad. And then interesting. So we have some folks saying it's all about overprivileged access.
Mhm.
Maybe some of you are just reliant on the service provider. It's like, well, if the service provider gives me the privilege, controls, then we can tweak them. If not, maybe I'm just reliant on, hoping and praying. All
Okay,
right, so
so
it looks like we can't tell good versus bad is winning, which it should. I think that we're really sitting right smack dab in the middle of that. And that's a big issue for everyone. So I'm going to end and then share the results here. You should be able to see it on your screen. I'll let you check out the results. I'm not sure. Can you see it? I hope.
yeah, we can see it.
Excellent, excellent.
Actually,
Yeah,
our
they
chat
give
is
kind of
disabled for everyone because we are presenting, so it just acts as like a distraction. But we
okay.
can, yeah, you wouldn't be able to hear from people. But please use the question and answer, pop up to add your questions. But for now, chat is disabled. Thank you.
I like this new mode where I could be like the little avatar in the corner. It's cool. All right, so I introduced in my JIT-Trust note, I introduced the concept of a JIT-Trust, kind of a draft taxonomy. Now, I didn't expect everyone to go out and adopt it. I just wanted to show an example. And really, it was because it occurred to me that, of course, we've got, this autonomy, these autonomous bots that are emerging agents. Um, and they've got agency, right? Like, the glass example. Well, you tell it to do something. It's kind of like a 6-year-old. Sorry, I love my kid, but sometimes you tell my 6-year-old what to do. She'll just do, I don't know, something along the way. And then when she gets to the final thing I asked and might need a few reminders, right? I sort of think of agents in this manner because they're very much, well, I'll do part of what you asked me to do and then do something along the way, right? And then, of course, we need, memory, right? The agents are possessing greater, extensions of memory. I don't know if anybody was tracking the whole Molt book and OpenClaw thing. I like to use it as a reference because it's where agents kind of went off the rails and did their own thing. But the agents that were collaborating on Moltbook even built their own memory system. I don't know if you knew that. It got checked into GitHub. And then, of course, again, they can execute tools, right? So, this means that they can potentially evolve or augment their own tasks. And of course, this is exactly the stated goal of some of the providers out there. They want the models to continuously learn. And so that means that I came to the conclusion that intent must be extracted from each interaction and it's defined by their goals and the trajectories of the behavior, not just their individual actions. So we had to have a taxonomy, right? So if you back to let's say IP address reputation, all the labeling and tagging that goes on there, or even in malware land, we label and tag all of the malware and variations. We call it MITRE ATT&CK at the framework level, right? We need some way to be able to kind of talk about what kinds of intent can occur. So an intent label, for example, is the agent goal aligned, right? You know, is it taking logical steps that map to that end goal? Is there goal manipulation that maybe have occurred? And we can kind of monitor for that. There's also the tool execution. Is it least privilege, or is it maybe confused and disconnecting, doing other variations of tool access, right? Is the data staged properly? Is there memory poisoning? We can monitor that kind of and then convey it within the intent intelligence system. And then obviously look at, delegated trust and, how is the delegated trust behaving, right? And we can kind of rank and rate all of these things in a scoring system. So the idea is that scoring system can help us, sort of build out the policy for decisions, right? Well, this agent, if it's 90 to 100 score, it's aligned, right? If it's 70 to 89, maybe we need to take a look at that and maybe ask the, user to select from various options, right? Or maybe step up authentication or do some other variety of mitigations. And then if it's 40 or below, and of course we can invert the scoring, doesn't really matter, but then that one's a rogue agent, right? You need to kill that thing and restart it, right? Or maybe we can inject guardrailing, as a conversation is occurring, maybe to sort of nudge one back. But the idea of this shared scoring is really that you can then federate decision making beyond just the single agent that is driving an interaction, right? And then so if you go to the principal level, ephemeral access grants replace these long-lived credentials, and a lot of folks are calling it, ZSP. And you also have the evolution of this notion of adaptive trust. So you might increase the friction and the validity. You might, uh, privilege reduce dynamically. Maybe it had access to all the databases, but when it gets to a 70, I always dreamed of this world where we could, sort of like, sorry, Nupur, I'm going to use you as an example. If Nupur is acting a little weird, then maybe we should reduce her privileges just for a moment. But nah, I wouldn't do that to her. Flagging and alerting, you might flag and alert an agent, raise additional monitoring on it, and then maybe again suspend and then relaunch to cleanse the agent if it starts to go awry. And I kind of outlined maybe various, levels of consideration. And obviously, I think this concept needs to evolve more. So, JIT-Trust is basically a strategic shift, a move away from a simple allow and deny access control. Just-in-time trust uses continuous and intent-aware risk scoring. It neutralizes autonomous compromise and adversarial hijacking, and it provides this idea of the collective agentic defense with intent intelligence across peers. Vendors need to provide a very auditable proof of real-time trust across agents, in my opinion, just like we do with humans, and then collect intent intelligence in the SOC and federate it, right? Convey it to others. And then, obviously, how we do implementation here requires a unified identity layer. So we need to pick, systems that unify identity and identity management, ideally around credentials that are hardware root of trust based. Then we need an identity security layer for all of the monitoring, the anomaly, monitoring, and all of that. We also need access governance to do the just-in-time access. In some ideal cases, you want to record what an agent's doing, especially if it's driving a user interface. We need auditability, policies that we can apply and maybe adjust, and maybe even dual authorization. Let's go back to, bring the human in the loop. And I introduced the concept of unified agentic defense platforms, which, kind of look across the entirety of the landscape of AI interactions, the model risk, all the way to data security, the ability to implement label data contextualize that for agents, allow them to interact across the enterprise, and enforce policies, using intent in the mix here. And then obviously, I visualize that the future of Agentics would include endpoint visibility or workload visibility and the behaviors of those agents brought to the system to make these wider angle lens decisions and help enable the SOC to make various changes. So another quick poll here.
Yes, so we have a last poll of the day. So that is on JIT-Trust intent scoring. Please pop in your responses here, folks.
Okay, so the question is, if you implement a JIT-Trust style intent scoring, what would you use it for first? Would that be adaptive access control, detect agent drift lateral movement? I want to kill it. I love how the SOC's like, I'm gonna kill it, so various different responses we could use here. I think I made everyone choose kill it. I love it. So far, it looks like the kill switch session termination is winning. A lot of folks, 30% of folks choosing auditability, and then adaptive access control lower on the radar. And that's curious. I mean, I do like the kill it approach, though, I must say. Kill the agents.
Now it's a tie. It's a tie now with
It's
auditability.
a tie. Auditability. Oh, yes. We've got to go back to our auditors, of course. So, you got to tell them what we're doing with the agents. Um, so, yeah, it's a good tie between the kill switch and auditability, detecting the agent drift and lateral movement. I'd actually say most of us are in that, discovery phase in a lot of cases out there in the larger enterprises. I'm going to go ahead and share these results so we can move on. I hope this has been fun for everyone. So there's the results. Adaptive access control losing, which come on, JIT-Trust is supposed to do that for us. But I know what drives it. I think it's important that we make sure the agents are performing properly. All right, so at a wide angle lens, we've got a bunch of different specialists here, and by no means is this an exhaustive list of all of the vendors that are entering and competing in the landscape. And you can look to the SACR website for a ton of research on UADP, what would I call unified agentic defense platforms, non-human and identity, and other types of vendors that are emerging here. These are just some good names that we've done some analysis recently on. And then there's a new emerging space, and I'm going to go out on a wire here and call it Agentic Runtime Identity Security Enforcement, or ARISE. And the reason I like ARISE is, we're kind of rising up these agents, right? And there's a bunch of emerging players here that are applying both deterministic governance and non-deterministic governance, as well as access control within the runtime. And this is a sort of I would say it's a subcategory of unified agentic defense platforms. So with that, I hope you guys had a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And this has been a fun conversation to have. Thank you very much.
So, Lawrence, we have a lot of questions for you. So, we have around six. So, let's get into it.
Okay.
So, first, one of the questions that our audience asked, like, what are the main challenges when setting up JIT Trust?
Ooh, I think the concept is early. So, and I think really the big challenge is that a lot of vendors need to be encouraged to sort of move in the direction of JIT trust and the intelligence sharing concept. And so I think the biggest challenge, at least in my mind, is getting them to move in that direction. I would say that we need to encourage vendors to go there, essentially.
Sounds good. Okay, the
Yeah.
next question is, how does a dynamic behavior-based trust model specifically address AI hallucinations?
Ooh. I mean, hallucinations are can be challenging, right? I mean, really, that's part of goal alignment, right? So, generally speaking, hallucinations, if we're talking about, hey, the original user prompt said, hey, go spawn a shell and, edit my sys, CTL conf file, and it starts to go edit, I don't know, Etsy, cronny D and some other configuration file. Wow, that's probably not what we want, right? That must have been a hallucination. It went off the rails. The goal alignment's off. So goal alignment is one way to detect that. And then, of course, there's, I mean, all kinds of other mechanisms. So, for example, when we're interacting with LLMs, there's content caching, there's cache and interaction monitoring that's done, prompt monitoring that can, sort of indicate that. And a lot of the implementations of this are using a small language model to basically look at and guard the main model, right? So as you're interacting with, let's say, an OpenAI or some other ilk, the small language model is there kind of as a little a guard. Um, and so, we're using AI to police AI in a lot of cases, which,
Yeah, that's
it's a mix of various controls. Other questions? Yeah.
yeah, for sure. That's a quite detailed answer. I hope, Anna, you have
Sorry.
found the response. So the next question is, how do you measure the effectiveness or the ROI of the JIT trust? Are there any
Ooh,
like
that's a
few
great
points? Maybe
question.
like 1 to 2 points. How do you measure
I think it's a hard one to
that?
measure. I think that, for example, we might be able to extract telemetry about the quality of various agents over time. So, for example, you might be able to attach to the scoring attributes of reliability. So, when I proposed the scoring, I was mostly focused on threat, but you could also extend it to things like the ability to um, execute, right? So as an agent is performing its duties, if it's very reliable over time, it can be labeled and then give you more intelligence. So I think that's the way to do it. And that can be tied to the business functions that you're executing with the agents. All right, next one.
So the next one is what industries or use cases benefit the most from this model, we would say.
I would say, well, now, given that everyone in prompt filtering is using intent intelligence. They're just not federating and scoring agents to go lateral. I think it's in use everywhere, pretty much. Everyone is doing intent intelligence. They're
Mhm.
just not extending it. And that's, the problem I think that the industry has to grapple with.
Sounds good. And then we will take more two questions. So William asked, would this way of access give you the ability to see exactly what the agent does? Every
Well,
action, what it touches inside production once the access has been granted?
I
That's
think
it.
that's a great question. I think that what we're seeing across all these vendors, and that's why we sort of charted the UADP concept, was we think that's the destination we're all heading in. But there's a lot of vendors that I just talked to in the runtime slide, and what they're doing is they're tying more of the runtime, the MCP actions, and I think what we're doing, the best way to sort of think of this is we're evolving towards the runtime. We're shifting right in security for Agentics.
Okay, great answer. So, this next question, or the last question, since we are also mindful of the time, is by Mark. I think he mentioned that our runtime agentic slide lacked the traditional large scale IGA players. Where do you see these IGA platforms coming in, helping to provide the JIT trust solutions? So, the idea
Oh, I
within,
think,
yeah.
yeah, sorry. I think everyone is evolving in this direction. I mean, and they have to, right? So we tend to focus at SACR on the emerging players and what they're doing and contributing. But certainly the larger players are evolving too. They tend to be consolidators as well. So I mean, a lot of them have been making acquisitions. And so to me, um, I think, well, the one way to look at it is the David and Goliath thing, right? David emerges and Goliath has to evolve, right? And so I think that security is an always evolving and always consolidating market. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. True. So we have one more question left. I don't know if you would like to answer,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
so we'll take it. Since a standardized taxonomy is necessary, what would SACR recommend to drive industry consensus? Mm.
I think that everyone needs to recognize, especially in the unified agentic defense and runtime, arise areas, they need to recognize there's going to be tremendous value in doing it, right? They're going to get a much more strong uptake in the agent to agent communications realm in general. And so I think that it benefits everyone, just like, with firewall or endpoints. Why do we share, IOCs, and why do we share IP addresses and reputations? For the same reason. We all benefit collectively from doing that. Now, sometimes we need to be government enabled, but I'd certainly encourage all the vendors to look at this as a consortium opportunity, right? An ability to interoperate together for the betterment of everyone.
Nicely put. Thank you so much, Lawrence, and
Sure.
everyone for their questions. And I hope everyone found it really useful. Please don't forget us to like, this webinar on our YouTube. We will post the recording for everyone who's attended. We will also email you expected by tomorrow because it will go to a post-production stage as well. But really happy and excited to have all of you here. Please also follow us on LinkedIn. We are rapidly publishing our new reports. We actually recently published the DLP report. Please follow our LinkedIn to know more about it and also subscribe to our Substack. But thank you so much for your time today. Lawrence, you are always so lively and so helpful. Thank you for your time today as well. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.